Have you ever wondered why you keep gaining belly fat even though you feel like you are eating healthy? You exercise sometimes, you skip dessert most nights, you try to do everything right, but the fat around your stomach just will not go away. In fact, it keeps growing. And the most frustrating part is that you might be doing something every single evening that is making it worse without even knowing it. Tonight, we are going to talk about something that most people never connect to their belly fat. It is not about how much you eat. It is not even really about what you eat during the day. It is specifically about what you eat after 6 in the evening. Because after 6 p.m. your body is in a completely different hormonal state than it is during the morning or afternoon, and certain foods that are totally fine earlier in the day become fat storing machines when you eat them at night. We are going to go deep on this today. We are going to talk about insulin. We are going to talk about insulin. We are going to talk about visceral fat. We are going to talk about what happens inside your body while you sleep. And we are going to name the specific food that is causing all of this damage, so you can make one simple change that could transform how your body looks and feels. So let us start from the very beginning, because to understand why this one food is so dangerous at night, you first need to understand insulin. Most people think insulin is only a problem for diabetics, but that is completely wrong. Insulin affects every single person on this planet every single day. It is one of the most powerful hormones in your entire body, and when it goes wrong, it causes weight gain, inflammation, fatigue, brain fog, and yes, visceral fat. Here is what insulin actually does. Every time you eat food that contains carbohydrates or sugar, your blood sugar rises. Your pancreas detects this rise and releases insulin into your bloodstream. Insulin acts like a key that unlocks your cells so they can absorb the sugar from your blood and use it for energy. This is a completely normal and necessary process. Without insulin, you would die. The problem is not insulin itself. The problem is too much insulin too often at the wrong times. When insulin levels are high, your body is in full storage mode. It is taking energy from your blood and storing it. And if your cells already have enough energy stored in them, the excess gets converted into fat. Specifically, gets stored as visceral fat, which is the dangerous fat that sits deep inside your abdomen around your organs. This is not the soft fats you can pinch on the outside. Visceral fat is deep internal fat, and it is directly linked to heart disease, diabetes, inflammation, and a shorter lifespan. Now here is where the time of day becomes critical. Your body follows a natural rhythm called the circadian rhythm. This rhythm controls almost everything in your biology, including how sensitive your cells are to insulin. In the morning, your cells are highly insulin sensitive. This means insulin works efficiently. A small amount of insulin can do a big job. Your cells open up, easily absorb the sugar quickly, and your blood sugar returns to normal fast. But as the day goes on, your insulin sensitivity decreases. By evening, your cells are significantly less responsive to insulin. This means when you eat something that raises your blood sugar after 6 p.m., your pancreas has to pump out much more insulin to do the same job. And because your cells are not responding as well, the sugar stays in your blood longer. Your insulin stays elevated longer, and your body spends more time in fat storage mode. This is not a theory. This has been proven in multiple clinical studies. Researchers have given people identical meals at different times of day and measured their insulin response. The exact same food eaten at night produces a significantly higher and longer lasting insulin spike than the same food eaten in the morning. Your body is literally more efficient at processing carbohydrates and sugar in the first half of the day than in the second half. So now you understand why the timing of what you eat matters so much. But what is the specific food we are talking about? What is the one thing that you might be eating after 6 p.m. that is spiking your insulin all night and feeding your visceral fat? It is refined carbohydrates. Specifically white rice, white bread, pasta, crackers, cereals, and anything made with refined flour or processed grains. These are the foods that break down almost instantly in your digestive system into pure glucose, which floods your bloodstream and demands a massive insulin response. And when you eat them at night, when your insulin activity is already low, The damage is dramatically worse than any other time of day. Let us talk about white rice first, because for millions of Americans, this is a dinner staple. White rice has had its fiber and nutrients stripped away during processing. What is left is almost pure starch, which converts to sugar incredibly fast. When you eat a cup of white rice, your blood sugar can spike within 15 to 30 minutes. For most healthy adults, this is manageable during the day because insulin sensitivity is higher. But eat that same cup of white rice at 8 or 9 at night and your blood sugar spike is higher, your insulin response is bigger, and it takes much longer for everything to return to normal. Studies have shown that people who eat high glycemic carbohydrates like white rice at dinner have measurably higher insulin levels not just right after the meal, but for hours afterward. Some research shows insulin can remain elevated for 4 to 6 hours after a high carbohydrate evening meal. This means if you eat white rice or white bread pasta or crackers at 9 at night, your insulin might still be elevated at 1 or 2 in the morning, and during all those hours while you are sleeping, your body is not burning fat. It cannot burn fat when insulin is high. It is in storage mode. It is building fat. Specifically, it is building visceral fat. Now let us talk about bread, because bread is everywhere in the American diet. White sandwich bread, hamburger buns, dinner rolls, bagels, flour tortillas, pita bread. All of these are made from refined white flour, which is just another form of rapidly digesting starch. The glycemic index of white bread is actually higher than table sugar. That means white bread raises your blood sugar faster than sugar does. When you sit down to dinner and eat a couple of dinner rolls or a sandwich on white bread before your main course, you are already flooding your bloodstream with glucose before you have even had your main meal. And the combination effect is something most people never think about. You have the rolls, then you have pasta or rice with dinner, then maybe a small dessert. Each of these individually would cause an insulin spike. But combined in one meal eaten late in the evening, the cumulative insulin response is enormous. Your pancreas is working overtime. Insulin is flooding your system. And all of that excess energy that your sleeping body does not need is being directed straight into visceral fat storage. Pasta deserves its own conversation because so many Americans eat pasta for dinner. It feels like a comfort food. It feels filling and satisfying. And there is a persistent myth that pasta is better than other refined carbs because it has a slightly lower glycemic index when cooked al dente. But here is the reality. A typical dinner serving of pasta is not a small portion. Most people eat 2 or even 3 cups of cooked pasta in one sitting. That is an enormous carbohydrate load. Even if each gram of pasta raises blood sugar slightly more slowly than white bread, the sheer volume of carbohydrates you are consuming means the total blood sugar rise and the total insulin response is massive. And again, the timing makes everything worse. Pasta at noon for lunch is a very different metabolic event than pasta at 7 or 8 at night. Your body can handle it much better at lunch. At dinner, your insulin sensitivity is declining, your body is preparing for sleep, your metabolism is slowing down, you do not need that much fuel, and all the excess energy gets stored. Let us also talk about cereals, because many Americans do not just eat these at breakfast. Plenty of people have a bowl of cereal as a late night snack. Cereal before bed might be one of the worst things you can do for your insulin levels and your visceral fat. Most breakfast cereals, even the ones that are marketed as healthy whole grain or heart healthy, are loaded with refined carbohydrates and added sugar. A bowl of cereal with milk at 10 or 11 at night is essentially a massive sugar and starch delivery directly into your bloodstream right before you go to sleep. Your insulin spikes. Your body has no use for all that energy because you are about to lie down and sleep, and the glucose that is not immediately absorbed gets converted and stored as fat while you sleep. Crackers are another sneaky culprit. People snack on crackers in the evening while watching television. A few crackers here, a few more crackers there. Before you know it, you have eaten a significant amount of refined starch. Most crackers are made from refined white flour with very little fiber. They digest rapidly. They spike blood sugar quickly. And when this happens in the evening, the insulin response is prolonged, and your body spends the early part of the night in fat storage mode instead of fat burning mode. Now let us talk about what actually happens while you sleep, because this is where the real damage from evening insulin spikes occurs, and most people have no idea about this. Sleep is supposed to be your body's prime fat burning time. When you are in deep sleep, your growth hormone levels rise significantly. Growth hormone is a powerful fat burning hormone. It signals your body to break down stored fat and use it for energy to repair tissues, maintain muscle, and carry out all the restorative processes that happen during sleep. But here is the critical thing about growth hormone. It only works properly when insulin is low. Growth hormone and insulin are essentially opposites. When insulin is high, growth hormone is suppressed. They cannot both be active at the same time. So when you eat refined carbohydrates after 6 p.m. and your insulin spikes and stays elevated for hours into the night, you are directly blocking the fat burning that is supposed to happen while you sleep. Instead of burning fat while you sleep, you are storing fat while you sleep. And this happens night after night after night for years in most Americans without them ever understanding why their belly fat keeps growing even when they feel like they are eating reasonably well. There is another hormone that gets disrupted by late evening insulin spikes, and that is cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone, but it also plays a major role in fat storage, particularly visceral fat storage. When blood sugar rises rapidly and then crashes, it creates a physiological stress response in the body. Cortisol is released, and cortisol specifically directs fat storage to the abdominal area around the organs. This is why people with chronically high cortisol levels almost always develop visceral fat, even if they are not overeating. The insulin spike from refined carbohydrates at night triggers a cortisol response, and that cortisol response tells your body to store fat in the deepest, most dangerous place it can store it. Leptin is another hormone that gets thrown off by this pattern. Leptin is your satiety hormone. It is produced by your fat cells, and it tells your brain that you have enough energy stored and that you do not need to eat more. When leptin works properly, you feel satisfied, you stop eating naturally, and your body is able to regulate its own weight. But when you eat refined carbohydrates at night and insulin spikes repeatedly over many weeks and months, your fat cells become overwhelmed. They start producing leptin, constantly trying to send a signal to stop eating. But your brain starts to ignore the signal. This is called leptin resistance. And once you develop leptin resistance, you never feel truly full. You always feel like you could eat a little more. Your cravings increase, especially for more carbohydrates and sugar. And your body loses its ability to regulate its own weight naturally. The connection between evening refined carbohydrates, insulin, visceral fat, and leptin resistance creates a self-reinforcing cycle that is very difficult to break once it gets established. You eat refined carbs at night. Insulin spikes. Fat gets stored as visceral fat. Visceral fat produces inflammatory chemicals. Those inflammatory chemicals promote more leptin resistance. Leptin resistance drives more cravings for carbohydrates. You eat more refined carbs at night. The cycle continues and gets worse over time. The how? Let us talk about inflammation, because visceral fat is not just sitting there being cosmetically unattractive. It is metabolically active tissue. It is constantly producing inflammatory chemicals called cytokines. These cytokines circulate through your entire bloodstream and cause inflammation throughout your body. Chronic low-grade inflammation is now understood to be at the root of almost every major chronic disease. Heart disease, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, certain cancers, autoimmune conditions. All of these are linked to chronic inflammation. And visceral fat driven by repeated insulin spikes from evening refined carbohydrates is one of the primary drivers of that chronic inflammation. The inflammatory chemicals produced by visceral fat also make insulin resistance worse. They interfere with insulin signaling at a cellular level. This means the more visceral fat you accumulate, the more insulin resistant you become. And the more insulin resistant you become, the more insulin your body needs to release to handle the same amount of carbohydrates. More insulin means more fat storage. More fat storage means more visceral fat. More visceral fat means more inflammation. More information means more insulin resistance. This cycle can go on for decades and most people never understand what is driving it. Let us also address something that a lot of people wonder about. Why does this seem to affect some people more than others? We probably know someone who eats pasta and bread every night and seems to stay slim. There are a few reasons for this variation. Genetics play a role in baseline insulin insensitivity. Some people are naturally more insulin sensitive than others and can handle more carbohydrates without the same fat storage response. Age is a major factor too. Insulin sensitivity declines with age, so the same eating patterns that seemed harmless at 25 can become very problematic at 35 or 45. Activity level matters enormously because exercise dramatically improves insulin, especially strength training. As sleep quality plays a role because poor sleep increases insulin resistance, making the problem worse. But even if you are genetically lucky, even if you are young, even if you exercise regularly, the pattern of eating refined carbohydrates late in the evening is working against your metabolism. It is creating unnecessary insulin spikes at the worst possible time of day, and over time it accumulates. The person who seems fine eating pasta every night at 40 might find themselves struggling with stubborn belly fat at 50, because the damage from repeated evening insulin spikes is cumulative. Let us talk about what happens in your liver specifically, because this is another piece of the puzzle that most people are not aware of. When you eat refined carbohydrates at night and your blood sugar rises dramatically, your liver steps in to try to help manage the excess glucose. The liver converts excess glucose into triglycerides, which are a form of fat. These triglycerides get released into your bloodstream. Some get stored in your fat cells, but some get stored directly in your liver. Over time, this leads to a condition called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is now one of the most common liver conditions in America, affecting roughly a quarter of the adult population. A fatty liver is an insulin-resistant liver. When your liver becomes insulin-resistant, it no longer responds properly to insulin signals. It keeps producing glucose even when blood sugar is already high because it cannot read the insulin signal telling it to stop. This makes your overall insulin resistance worse and creates a feedback loop that drives more visceral fat accumulation. And the whole thing is being fueled by those repeated evening refined carbohydrate meals that are spiking insulin over and over again every night. Now let us get specific about portion sizes and timing, because these details really matter. Research suggests that insulin sensitivity starts declining meaningfully around 6 in the evening for most people. By 8 or 9 p.m., it has dropped significantly. By 10 or 11 p.m., it is at its lowest point of the day. This means the later you eat refined carbohydrates, the worse the insulin response will be. A small amount of refined carbs at 6:30 is less damaging than the same amount at 9:30. And eating nothing with refined carbs after 8 p.m. is dramatically better than eating the same thing at 10 p.m. Portion size obviously matters too. Hello 1 3 my testing 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 my test. But the key insight is that even moderate portions of refined carbohydrates in the evening create a prolonged insulin elevation that does not happen to the same degree during the day. So the goal is not just to eat less of these foods at night, but ideally to shift your carbohydrate consumption earlier in the day when your body can handle it much more efficiently. There is also a powerful concept called carbohydrate backloading that some nutrition researchers have explored. The basic idea is that you front-load your carbohydrate consumption earlier in the day when insulin sensitivity is highest, and you reduce carbohydrates significantly in the evening. This approach allows you to still enjoy carbohydrates and get the energy benefits from them while avoiding the fat-storing consequences of eating them late when insulin sensitivity is low. Morning and early afternoon are the best times to eat rice, bread, pasta, and other starchy carbohydrates, if you are going to eat them at all. Let us also talk about what you should eat in the evening instead, because this is the practical question that matters most. What can you eat after 6 p.m. that will not spike your insulin and feed you visceral fat? The answer is foods that have a minimal effect on blood sugar and insulin. These fall into a few main categories. Protein is at the top of the list. Foods like chicken, fish, eggs, beef, turkey, and other animal proteins have very little effect on insulin when eaten without large amounts of carbohydrates. Protein does cause a small insulin release, but it is modest and brief compared to the massive, prolonged spike from refined carbohydrates. Non-starchy vegetables are another excellent evening food choice. Leafy greens, broccoli, cauliflower, zucchini, asparagus. Green beans, peppers, cucumbers, and similar vegetables have very little digestible carbohydrate and virtually no effect on blood sugar or insulin. You can eat large volumes of these vegetables in the evening and your insulin will barely move. They are filling, satisfying, and packed with nutrients, and they allow your body to stay in fat-burning mode through the night. Healthy fats are also appropriate in the evening. Avocado, olive oil, nuts, seeds, full-fat dairy, and other sources of healthy fat have essentially no effect on insulin. Fat does not require insulin to be metabolized. In fact, eating fat in the evening can actually help stabilize blood sugar and keep insulin low while you sleep. The old fear of eating fat at night making you fat is simply not supported by the evidence. It is the carbohydrates, and specifically refined carbohydrates, that drive the insulin spike and fat storage. Fat does not do this. Feet. Eggs deserve special mention as an evening food because they are one of the most nutritious and metabolically neutral foods you can eat. A couple of eggs in the evening will not spike your insulin. They provide high quality protein and fat. They are satisfying and they support muscle maintenance and cellular repair during sleep. Many people have replaced their late evening cereal or crackers habit with a couple of eggs and experienced significant changes in their body composition over time without feeling deprived. Nuts are another excellent evening option in reasonable quantities. Almonds, walnuts, pecans, macadamias, and similar nuts are high in fat and protein and low in digestible carbohydrates. They have a minimal effect on insulin. A small handful of nuts in the evening is a much better choice than crackers or cereal, and will support rather than undermine your overnight fat burning. The fiber question is worth addressing too, because fiber is the one component of carbohydrate containing foods that actually helps rather than hurts in the evening. Fiber slows the digestion of carbohydrates and blunts the blood sugar and insulin response. This is why whole foods like vegetables, legumes, and intact whole grains behave very differently in your body than refined carbohydrates. If you are going to have something with carbohydrates in the evening, choosing foods that are very high in fiber like lentils, beans, or certain vegetables is dramatically better than refined carbohydrates. The fiber acts as a buffer that prevents a sharp insulin spike. However, it is important to understand that even fiber-rich carbohydrate sources in large quantities at night will cause more insulin release than they would during the day due to the circadian decline in insulin sensitivity. So the principle remains the same. If you want to minimize evening insulin spikes and reduce visceral fat, the most effective strategy is to make your evening meals primarily protein, non-starchy vegetables, and healthy fats with minimal or no refined carbohydrates. Let us talk about beverages too, because this is an area where a lot of people are unknowingly causing insulin spikes in the evening. Fruit juice is one of the worst evening beverages you can choose. Even 100% natural fruit juice without added sugar is essentially liquid sugar. A glass of orange juice or apple juice in the evening causes a rapid blood sugar spike that is actually worse than eating the whole fruit because the fiber has been removed. The insulin response to a glass of juice at night is significant and prolonged. Sodas and sweetened beverages are obviously problematic. The sugar in regular soda causes a rapid blood sugar spike and a corresponding insulin release. But diet sodas are not as safe as people assume either. Research suggests that artificial sweeteners can trigger an insulin response even without raising blood sugar because your body has been conditioned to associate sweet taste with incoming glucose. This cephalic phase insulin response is not as large as the response to actual sugar, but it is real and it represents an unnecessary insulin release in the evening. Alcohol deserves a mention too because many Americans have a glass of wine or a beer in the evening. Alcohol interacts with insulin and blood sugar in complex ways. Beer in particular contains significant amounts of carbohydrates from the grain it is brewed from and causes a meaningful blood sugar and insulin response. Wine contains less carbohydrate than beer, but still causes some blood sugar effect, especially sweet wines. Cocktails mixed with juice, soda, or sweeteners can cause very significant insulin spikes. If you drink alcohol in the evening, spirits without mixers have the least impact on insulin. Water is obviously the best evening beverage for insulin management. Plain sparkling water, without teas, and black coffee all have essentially no effect on insulin. If you need something flavorful in the evening, these are your best choices from a metabolic standpoint. Now let us talk about the practical reality of changing these habits, because changing what you eat for dinner and in the evening is not easy. These are deeply ingrained habits for most people. Rice, bread, and pasta at dinner are cultural staples. They are comfort foods. They are what families have eaten together for generations. And telling yourself you can never eat these foods again is not realistic or necessary. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness and gradual improvement. Start by simply noticing what you are eating after 6 p.m. for 1 week without changing anything. Just observe. You might be surprised at how many refined carbohydrates are showing up in your evening meals and snacks. The crackers while cooking dinner, the bread rolls at the table, the pasta or rice as the main component of dinner, the cereal or toast before bed. For many people, the evening is when the vast majority of their refined carbohydrate consumption happens. Once you are aware of the pattern, you can start making substitutions. You do not have to eliminate everything at once. Start with the most obvious high-volume refined carbohydrate and find a substitute. If you eat a large bowl of pasta for dinner 3 nights a week, try replacing the pasta with zucchini noodles or spaghetti squash and keeping all the same sauce and toppings. You get much of the same experience with dramatically less instant impact. If you eat white rice with dinner every night, try cauliflower rice as a substitute, or simply reduce the portion of white rice and add more vegetables to fill your plate. If you snack on crackers or cereal in the evening, try replacing them with a small amount of nuts or a couple of hard-boiled eggs or some vegetables with hummus. These substitutions do not require you to feel deprived. They allow you to still eat in the evening while dramatically reducing the insulin impact of what you are consuming. Meal timing is another powerful lever you can pull without changing what you eat at all. Simply eating dinner earlier can make a significant difference. If you currently eat dinner at 8 or 9 at night, moving into 6 or 6:30 means your body is in a better state of insulin sensitivity when you eat and has more time to process the meal before sleep. Even 1 hour earlier can make a meaningful difference in how your body handles the carbohydrates in your meal. Some people find that intermittent fasting approaches pair well with this understanding. If your eating window ends at 6 or 7 p.m. and you do not eat again until the next morning, you are giving your body a long stretch of time with low insulin levels. During this time, growth hormone can work effectively. Your body can access stored fat for fuel, inflammation can decrease, and insulin sensitivity can recover and reset for the next day. Many people who adopt an earlier eating cutoff report significant reductions in visceral fat over time, even without making dramatic changes to what they eat. Sleep quality is closely connected to all of this, and it deserves attention. When you eat refined carbohydrates late in the evening and insulin stays elevated, your sleep quality is disrupted even if you do not realize it. High insulin at night interferes with a deep, slow-wave sleep that is most important for growth hormone release and fat metabolism. Blood sugar fluctuations during the night can cause you to wake up or sleep restlessly without knowing why. Many people who change their evening eating habits and reduce late-night refined carbohydrates report sleeping more deeply and waking up more rested within just a few weeks. And better sleep further improves insulin sensitivity the next day, creating a positive upward cycle. Exercise timing is worth mentioning too, because a short walk after dinner is one of the most powerful things you can do to blunt the insulin response from your evening meal. When you walk after eating, your muscles become more insulin sensitive and absorb glucose from your bloodstream much more efficiently. This reduces the amount of insulin your pancreas needs to release, and shortens the time your insulin stays elevated after the meal. Research shows that even a 10 to 15-minute walk after dinner can significantly reduce post-meal blood sugar and insulin spikes. You do not need an intense workout. A entire walk is enough to make a meaningful difference. Strength training deserves special mention as well, because building muscle is one of the most powerful long-term strategies for improving insulin sensitivity. Muscle tissue is the largest consumer of glucose in your body. The more muscle you have, the more glucose gets absorbed and burned during normal daily activity, and the less insulin your body needs to manage blood sugar. People who do consistent strength training 2 to 3 times per week have dramatically better insulin sensitivity than sedentary people, and can often handle more carbohydrates without the same fat storage response. Stress management is another piece of the puzzle, because chronic stress elevates cortisol, and cortisol promotes visceral fat storage and worsens insulin resistance. When you are under chronic stress, your body is in a constant low-level fight or flight state. Cortisol signals your body to release stored glucose into the bloodstream to provide quick energy. Insulin has to respond to that glucose release. This creates an ongoing background of elevated insulin even when you have not eaten anything. I don't want to my testing significantly. Stress reduction practices like meditation, deep breathing, regular outdoor time, adequate sleep, and meaningful social connection all help reduce cortisol levels and improve the overall hormonal environment that governs fat storage and fat burning. This is not separate from the nutrition discussion, it is deeply connected. The same person who eats fewer refined carbohydrates in the evening and also manages stress better and sleeps well will see results dramatically faster than someone who only changes one variable. Hydration affects insulin sensitivity too. Dehydration has been shown to impair insulin signaling. When your cells are not adequately hydrated, they become less responsive to insulin. Most Americans are chronically mildly dehydrated, especially by the end of the day. Drinking adequate water throughout the day and having water with your evening meal supports better insulin function and blood sugar regulation. Many people find that drinking a large glass of water before their evening meal also naturally reduces how much they eat, which reduces the carbohydrate load and therefore the insulin response. The gut microbiome has emerged as an important factor in insulin sensitivity and visceral fat accumulation over the last decade of research. The trillions of bacteria living in your digestive system influence how you metabolize carbohydrates, how your cells respond to insulin, and how much visceral fat you accumulate. A diverse, healthy gut microbiome produces short-chain fatty acids that improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammation. An unhealthy gut microbiome dominated by the wrong types of bacteria produces compounds that promote inflammation, insulin resistance, and fat storage. Refined carbohydrates actually feed the harmful bacteria in your gut while starving the beneficial ones. High-fiber vegetables and fermented foods feed the beneficial bacteria and support a healthy microbiome. So the recommendation to replace evening refined carbohydrates with non-starchy vegetables is doing double duty. It is reducing the direct insulin spike from the refined carbs, and it is improving the gut microbiome that influences insulin sensitivity and fat storage over the longer term. Magnesium is a mineral that plays a critical but often overlooked role in insulin function. Magnesium is required as a cofactor for over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, including the enzymes involved in insulin signaling and glucose metabolism. Research has consistently found that people with low magnesium levels have higher rates of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. And magnesium deficiency is extremely common in America because a typical American diet is low in magnesium-rich foods. The foods highest in magnesium are leafy green vegetables, nuts, seeds, and legumes. Many of the refined carbohydrate foods that dominate the American dinner table have very little magnesium. So replacing eating refined carbohydrates with magnesium-rich alternatives like leafy greens and nuts not only reduces the direct insulin impact, but also helps correct the magnesium deficiency that is making insulin resistance worse. Sleep duration is a factor that does not get enough attention in these conversations. Consistently sleeping less than 7 hours per night causes measurable increases in insulin resistance. Sleep deprivation raises cortisol levels, disrupts hunger hormones including leptin, and ghrelin, increases cravings for high carbohydrate foods, and reduces the ability of cells to respond to insulin. Studies have shown that just a few nights of inadequate sleep can produce levels of insulin resistance equivalent to several months of unhealthy eating. And people who are sleep deprived tend to eat more refined carbohydrates during the day and evening because their brain is seeking quick energy from easily digestible glucose sources. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where poor sleep drives carbohydrate cravings, and carbohydrate consumption at night drives poor sleep quality. Chi 4. The relationship between light exposure and insulin sensitivity is fascinating and relevant to the evening eating discussion. Your body uses light signals to regulate its circadian rhythm, including the timing of insulin sensitivity. Exposure to blue light from screens, phones, tablets, and televisions in the evening signals to your brain that it is still daytime and disrupts the natural evening transition toward lower metabolic activity and higher melatonin production. This circadian disruption from evening screen exposure worsens insulin sensitivity in the evening. So the combination of sitting in front of a screen, eating refined carbohydrates at night, is doubly damaging for insulin and visceral fat. The screen exposure is impairing insulin sensitivity, and the refined carbohydrates are simultaneously spiking insulin at exactly the worst time. Let us zoom out and look at the big picture, because understanding the long-term trajectory of these patterns helps explain why so many Americans find themselves with stubborn visceral fat in middle age that was not there in their 20s. In your 20s, your baseline insulin sensitivity is typically quite high. Your metabolism is more forgiving. You can eat pasta and bread at night and your body handles it reasonably well. The insulin spike happens, but it resolves relatively quickly. Not much visceral fat gets stored, you feel fine. But every year of eating refined carbohydrates in the evening is adding small increments of visceral fat. Where insulin sensitivity is gradually declining, your liver is becoming slightly more fatty, your gut microbiome is shifting toward a less beneficial composition, your cells are becoming slightly less responsive to insulin. None of these changes are dramatic enough in any single year to cause obvious problems, but by the time you are in your 30s or 40s, the cumulative effect has become significant. The same patterns that seem harmless at 25 are now causing real, visible changes in body composition. Belly fat that was not there before is now growing. Energy levels are declining. Sleep quality is getting worse. Cravings for carbohydrates are stronger. And because the decline has been gradual, most people do not connect it to the evening eating habits they have had for decades. They look for other explanations. They blame their metabolism slowing down with age. They blame stress. They blame not exercising enough. And while all of those factors play a role, the evening refined carbohydrate habit is often the single biggest lever they have never thought to pull. The good news is that insulin sensitivity can be meaningfully improved in a relatively short period of time with the right changes. Studies on dietary interventions have shown measurable improvements in insulin within 2 to 4 weeks of reducing refined carbohydrates. Visceral fat, while it takes longer to lose, responds well to sustained insulin reduction. People who consistently reduce their evening refined carbohydrate intake, improve their sleep quality, exercise regularly, and manage stress often see significant reductions in waist circumference within 3 to 6 months. Not dramatic overnight changes, but real steady progress that continues to compound over time. The most important thing to understand is that this is not about following a strict diet or depriving yourself. It is about understanding the specific mechanism by which refined carbohydrates in the evening are causing insulin spikes and visceral fat accumulation, and making informed choices based on that understanding. When you understand why eating white rice or pasta or bread after 6 p.m. is metabolically damaging in ways that are different from eating those same foods at lunch, you are empowered to make different choices. Not because someone told you to follow a set of rules, but because you understand the biology and you can see how the pieces fit together. Your body is incredibly adaptable. It is designed to be lean and energetic and healthy. When you remove the specific evening habits that are working against it and give it the nutrients it actually needs for overnight repair and recovery, it responds. Insulin sensitivity improves, visceral fat decreases, sleep deepens, energy increases, inflammation decreases. The hormonal environment that governs your metabolism improves across the board. The single most impactful change most Americans could make right now is simply to look at what they are eating between 6 p.m. and bedtime and replace the refined carbohydrates with protein, non-starchy vegetables, and healthy fats. Not a complete overhaul of everything, just that one targeted shift in the evening hours, because that is when the insulin and visceral fat damage is happening most intensely. That is when your body is most vulnerable to the effects of these foods, and that is where the greatest opportunity for change exists. Understanding this is the first step. Acting on it is where the transformation begins. Shh.